Good afternoon, everyone. I will be calling to order the May 28th, 2024 Clackamas County Budget Committee meeting. As we move forward here, let's reintroduce ourselves to one another. So I'd ask that the members of the Budget Committee tell us who they are, and we'll start with, from my right.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Mark Shull.
Ben West, acting as Vice Chair, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Commissioner Martha Schrader.
Commissioner Paul Savas. Turn your mic on to Martha.
James Rhodes.
James Karn, citizen member.
Kenneth Cernak, citizen member.
Wendy Rader, citizen member.
And Tony, it's my understanding that we also have one of our members joining us virtually.
We are having some technical challenges. I'm working on getting her joined.
So we do have Ms. Lee here, and we'll move forward. And Ms. Lee, thank you for joining us virtually, and we will look forward to hearing from you also today. Thank you. Let's see. Now that we've all been introduced and we're on our way, I will now open the floor for nominations for chair.
I nominate James Karn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
James Karn has been nominated. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none. Congratulations, James. Clerk, would you please call the poll?
Vice Chair, Ms. Lee has joined us. Starting with the poll, I will start with Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Commissioner Shull.
Aye.
Mr. Cernak.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Thanks a lot, pal.
Ms. Rader.
Aye.
Ms. Lee.
Thanks, Chair.
Ms. Lee.
Aye. I think
I hear you, Ms. Lee. Thank you. Ms. Lee votes aye. Vice Chair West.
Aye. The vote is, was that 9-0? The vote is 9-0. Mr. Carnes, you are the elected chair. Once again, congratulations. And I turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, I hope. Since it'll be my first time as chair, I would ask for a little grace. It'll be a new position for me, but I certainly know I'll make a few mistakes, but I'll certainly do my best, and thank you. I have a script here. Where did we leave off? I apologize.
Next is nominations for vice chair.
Nominations for vice chair, okay. Okay, we'll open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Kenneth Cernak.
I second that.
Okay, Kenneth Cernak, we have a nomination and a second. Could we call the roll, please?
Ask if any other
Oh,
nominations.
any
first.
other nominations, forgive me. Hearing none, we can call for the roll.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Cernak.
Aye.
Commissioner Shull.
Aye.
Ms. Rader.
Aye. Oops, I thought you said Schrader.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Ms. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 9-0.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mr. Cernak. You'll be serving as our vice chair of the Budget Committee. Now we will open the floor, if I'm correct, for secretary. Nominations are now open for secretary of the Budget Committee. Do I have any nominations?
I'll nominate James Rhodes.
James Rhodes has been nominated. Do I have a second?
Second?
We have a second, Commissioner Schrader. Thank you. Any other nominations, please? Hearing none, we can call for the vote.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Ms. Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Ms. Rader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Mr. Cernak,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 9-0.
Congratulations, Mr. Rhodes. You'll be serving as our secretary.
Thank you, sir.
I will now open the floor for nominations for the appointment of one of our citizen members to be on the audit committee. Current appointee is Kenny Cernak, whose term is expiring. This appointment is a 2-year term until another member, this is an appointment into a 2-year term or the member's budget committee term expires. I will open the floor for nominations to sit on the audit committee.
I would like to nominate our newest member, if I might. I'll second that.
Thank you. Tony, could you repeat that? I think some members were not able to hear. Jan?
Ms. Lee, if I understand, you're nominating Ms. Rader as for the audit committee?
That's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Thank you for that nomination. Do we have any other nominations?
Do you accept, Wendy?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other nominations, please call the vote.
Mr. Cernak,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Ms. Rader,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Ms. Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 9-0.
Thank you. Congratulations, Wendy Rader, and I know that you will serve very well on that committee based on your background. So thank you for stepping up to that appointment. Our first order of business is to approve the approval of the April 24th, 2024 Budget Committee minutes. The minutes have been provided and previously distributed to you. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the Budget Committee meeting minutes dated April 24th as presented today.
Seconded.
Mr. Rhodes has made the motion, and we have a second by, was that Commissioner Schull? Correct, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the committee approve the April 24th, 2024 Budget Committee minutes as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call the poll?
Ms. Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Ms. Rader,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Mr. Cernak,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Aye.
Mr. Karn.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 9-0.
Thank you, 9-0. The motion passes. I would now ask Gary Schmidt, County Administrator, to move forward and present the budget message.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Budget Committee. I am pleased to present to you the proposed budget for Clackamas County for fiscal year 2024-2025. For the general county budget, the proposed budget is $1,569,745,275, including the 8 county service districts of which the Board of County Commissioners are the governing body. The total Clackamas County proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 is $2,098,772,002, a record in history for the highest Clackamas County budget ever. And really, that's for 3 reasons. American Rescue Plan Act dollars, ARPA dollars from the federal government, which is one-time money, opioid settlement money, which is from the state and one-time money, and supportive housing services measure tax from Metro, which for now is one-time money for 7 more years. We'll see what the voters decide. This proposed budget is balanced as required by Oregon law. And it is, I'll be asked this, it is sustainable and structurally sound if we follow the definitions of the Government Finance Officers Association. Now, I know our Board of Commissioners will be discussing definitions next month, but for today, if I use the definitions of the Government Finance Officers Association, this is a sustainable and structurally sound budget. Here are the definitions. Structurally sound, a structurally balanced budget supports financial stability for multiple years into the future. We have a 30-year budget forecast, which you'll hear in a moment, and we are in the black for 30 years. I would say that's structurally sound, with the caveat, with all things being the same as today, which we know is not the case. Things are going to change over time. Next, sustainable definition is to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but it's basically we're not borrowing today to affect tomorrow's dollars, which, again, this proposed budget, I believe, is sustainable by that definition. Now, what can change? We could have another pandemic. We could have a disaster we've not prepared for or thought of. The cost of doing business continues to go up every year. That's no surprise. Our very, very talented employees, they cost money with cost of living increases, merit increases. The PERS rates goes up every 2 years. Materials and supplies goes up. So with all things being the same, we're doing just fine, but as things adjust, as things change, that's when we come back to you each year and propose adjustments to the budget. This proposed budget is what I call a maintenance level budget. There are no major additions. There's not an influx of new staff. It is maintaining the status quo of how we budgeted the last fiscal year. With that, a quick recap. Last fiscal year, the county reduced general fund by $15 million to accommodate the annual payments for the replacement county courthouse, which start next year. These reductions did not cause any significant reductions or eliminations of programs or services at Clackamas County, because most of those programs and services that were funded with general fund, our amazing staff found other sources of funding, non-general fund sources. And that's how we basically kept most of those programs and services continuing, just using different funding streams. This upcoming year, fiscal year, in May 2025, the county will be making the first or milestone payment of $130 million for the replacement county courthouse. This is going to be paid from State of Oregon matching funds, which again, the State of Oregon is funding half the cost of the replacement county courthouse, and a small portion of general funds that we've already budgeted and held in reserve for this upcoming payment. There will be no other cuts or impact to the general fund to make this milestone payment. Last year, there were also some significant cost allocation changes made to our programs because our prior cost allocation model was 30 years old and was out of compliance with federal guidelines. Because the change was so drastic to many, I suggested, and the Budget Committee approved, a one-time general fund subsidy to most departments to ease the pain of those increased allocated costs. That one-time subsidy ended this upcoming proposed budget. However, in particular, the technology services cost allocation was increased to a level that caused pain to most departments, and I will own that I did not communicate as effectively with the departments of what this new change meant. So I have offered to minimize that pain, another one-time subsidy to most departments for this increase in technology services allocated costs. That'll be for this upcoming fiscal year only. Those of you in the special districts, you saw that for NCPRD, for example. That's what that was referring to. Quickly on the general fund, as you know, the general fund is property taxes. That's property taxes that residents of the county pay. This proposed budget includes approximately $160 million of general fund. That's a very, very small portion of your $2 billion budget, but the general fund dollars is your discretionary funds to spend any way that you wish. As a continued commitment to public safety, this proposed budget has 68% of the entire general fund going to public safety departments. $81.7 million is going to the sheriff's office, $15.1 million to the district attorney's office, $8.4 million to the juvenile department, and $3.3 million to disaster management. That's a total of $108.5 million of the $160 million, or 68%, is going to dedicated public safety programs and services. I'm not sure how else you could demonstrate your support for Public Safety Budget Committee and Board of County Commissioners unless you gave it all to public safety, in which case you'd be eliminating everything else, which I'm not proposing. The general fund contingency and general fund reserves are both at the required percentages. Contingency is at the required 5%, which is $22.5 million. The reserves is a required 10%, which is $19.5 million. Both are budgeted. The proposed full-time employee count for the proposed budget is 2,450 employees. That is 56 employees higher than 1 year ago in last year's proposed budget, and they are almost entirely Health, Housing, Human Services staff to accommodate the Supportive Housing Services Measure funds and implementing those programs. There are no new general funded FTEs in this proposed budget. I prepared this budget for all departments and all offices, including offices led by elected officials by the authority of Oregon Revised Statute 294.331, which designates counties will identify a budget officer, and that is me. The Board of County Commissioners has designated the county administrator as the budget officer for Clackamas County, and Clackamas County Code 209.060. I want to thank the staff who helped prepare this budget. Of course, every department and office and their staff, in particular the finance staff, for their incredible work over the last 6 months that we've been working on this. Elizabeth Comfort, the director of the finance department, Sandra Montoya, the budget manager, Cindy Becker, program manager in county administration, was a huge help, and the rest of the finance team, Blaze Riggins, Jian Zhang, Roxanne Fisher, Priscilla Montoya. Now, Budget Committee, you have received a proposed budget. It is now up to you to accept, reject, or modify this proposed budget. A reminder of your authorities. All committee members have 1 vote and equal authority. A quorum of this committee is 6 members. At least 6 members must be present to conduct business. Approval of and/or any changes to the proposed budget requires a majority vote, which is 6 votes out of the 10 members. This holds true even if all 10 members are not present. So regardless of whoever's here, you must have at least 6 to conduct business, and then 6 of you must vote in affirmative to make any changes. Budget committee members, you are prohibited from deliberating on the budget outside of budget committee meetings. You can, though, talk to each other individually or in a small group, but don't have a quorum. And for you, a quorum is 6. But still, not more than 2 of you at a time, please. You can talk about it, but don't deliberate outside of the budget meetings. If you do make any changes to the proposed general fund budget, you will need to tell me during this week what reductions you'd like to make elsewhere to balance the budget. Quickly on process, and then I'll stop talking and answer your questions. After I've answered your questions today, we're not done yet. Cindy Becker will give a quick presentation on the proposed budget as it relates to the general fund, just to give you all a reminder and have you in the same place before you hear discussions tomorrow or updates tomorrow. Starting tomorrow morning, you will hear from elected officials who lead departments first. They will individually present their office budgets. And then following that, Elizabeth Comfort and Sandra Montoya will present the organization's budget by subject and category, and department directors will be present to also co-present to share any significant changes to their department's budget and answer your questions. So that is a shift from last year. I'm bringing back department directors to work with Elizabeth and Sandra in the presentations of their budgets. You will have approximately 9 hours tomorrow to get through the entire county proposed budget, because you must finish that before you have your public testimony at 6 p.m. I think you can do it. 9 hours is a long time, but if we're getting close, I'll remind you to speed it up. And then starting this Thursday, you will begin deliberations and you will stay until you're finished. I believe you can finish on Thursday, but if not, we'll have you here Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and as long as it takes until you're done. You have to make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, who will then finally adopt the budget on June 20th. With that, thank you for hearing my message. I welcome any questions you may have about my budget message or our process today. And then again, after questions, Cindy will give a brief presentation. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Does any of the committee have any questions or discussion? Yeah, Commissioner Savas.
Based on discussion earlier today, I just want to have some thumbnail sketch of what for example, we heard about Fund 100, and we heard about all these different funds. Is Fund 100 a real thing? Is it used today, or is it something that's expired?
It's real. I'll ask Elizabeth or Sandra. Can you please answer that question?
Good afternoon, Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager. This kind of goes into a little bit of what I had for tomorrow, and hopefully I don't step on Cindy's presentation, because she's prepared quite a dazzling show for all of you, and so I don't want to steal her thunder at all. But we do want to share a little bit of just some fund accounting and the structure of Clackamas County, because it can get a little bit confusing. But fund accounting in Clackamas County is made up of 30 different funds. That's like 30 different businesses wrapped up in Clackamas County, and they're each separate. They can't be intermingled. That's called commingling, and it's restricted. That's difficult for us to understand because we report on it together, and we even call it Clackamas County. But when you break it down, anytime there's a different fund, what we're really saying is those are a separate set of books, and we can't use the money from one fund for the other unless it meets the eligibility requirements. So just like if you had two businesses side by side, you can't just dip into one business's cash register and say like, oh, well, I just took some money from yours. Like that wouldn't work, right? But certainly they could work together in partnership and make things happen. So those are some of the things that we will want to share with you. And similarly, the general fund, and this you'll have to remember, is it's the granddaddy of all of the funds. The general fund, there is no restriction on the general fund for its tax dollars. So there is restrictions on fees that are specific for items. So I'm thinking like CCSO, where there's alarm fees that could be restricted for a purpose. But tax dollars, property tax dollars, those are just general, and those are discretionary dollars that are available for whatever the board and this budget committee chooses. So that becomes really the money that becomes the discussion purpose. So that's where the majority of the budget is focused, not because the other funds aren't important, because legally we have to review every single fund, but it becomes the focus because that's where you have the most discretion. So just, I was telling Elizabeth today, just like in our household budget, in my household, our discussion is not about the mortgage or the car payment. Our discussion is, where do you want to eat? What movie do we want to watch? And that's what we spend the time, a lot of the discussion time, because that's our discretionary dollars. And similarly, in our Clackamas County budget, it's the discretionary dollars where we end up spending a lot of the time. And the discussions tend to get more heated as those discretionary dollars get tighter and tighter. So those decisions become more difficult to make. So your question is the general fund a real thing? Yes, and it will always be a real thing as those property tax dollars get closer to that expense. And our county administrator said, you know, what we've got going out in property tax dollars is almost equal. And you can look at that, they're almost identical now. And so that will become the challenge. And so that need for us to diversify revenue or continue to trim our budget so that we have maximum flexibility, that is where that golden balance is at for us.
Okay, so thank you, Sandra, for that explanation. It was kind of a redundant question, but I was hoping to actually have you talk through that. So my understanding is that a department that is not funded through general fund would have a unique number, right? And you mentioned several different funds, right?
30 different funds
30
across
different
Clackamas
funds.
County.
I would love to have a list of all those funds. Thank you.
So I want to also answer, yes, any department that receives general fund is in what's called Fund 100. It's a number of a fund that houses all general funded programs. We'll get the list for you, too.
Thank you, Sandra. Any other questions? Okay, I believe.
And I'm sorry, Gary, can I clarify that? So the rule is majority funded. So our government accounting standard says if the department is majority funded by the general fund, it has to be in the general fund. So that's where it teeters. Or the other one is, even if it's not majority funded, if its revenue is not specific, if it's not exclusive, so think Justice Court. Justice Court, the primary revenue source is not dedicated, so Justice Court has to be in the general fund. Likewise, CCSO, they are 51% general fund funded. By definition, they have to be in the general fund. So those are finite rules, and we have to review those, and the auditors review those every single year, and they will have us shift those if we're getting close.
So just to cap that off, thank you. This is almost exactly what I was looking for. Just to cap this off, so if they are minority funded, let's say 10% of their funding is general fund, they will have a separate lineup, a separate fund. And what will their restrictions be on Fund 100?
So if they're minority funded by the general fund, we have the option of not funding them in the general fund, but we would opt to not because it kind of muddies the water. So we would encourage the department to not put it in the general fund because of the risk of commingling the dollars that really don't belong to the general fund.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
I don't know if that answers your question
It
as well.
helps.
And so then we would move, and you would know, so all of the general fund is a 100. So anytime you see in any of the book, all of us are in a Fund 100. Any fund that is outside of the general fund begins with a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, 6, or 7. So any other number, and they're 3-digit numbers. So when you look at the book and at the reports, you'll see them beginning with another fund number, and that just means they are outside of the general fund.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Sandra. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Cindy Becker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Cindy Becker, County Administration. So do you have the slides, Tony? I can't see anything. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. So Commissioner Savas, great minds think alike, as this is the first slide. So one of the things, when I first came to the county, I got so confused because we talk about the general fund and general fund support. And I used to just kind of shake Elizabeth and say, which is it, which is it? And so Fund 100 is an actual fund, it's an actual, yes, it is real. Isn't there a thing about Virginia and Santa Claus? So Fund 100 is real. General fund support is actually the dollars that go into the other departments. So that's there's the fund itself, and then there are the dollars that are distributed to all the departments. And as Sandra said, the departments that are primarily funded with general funds, you'll see them exist in Fund 100. There are other sources of funding in Fund 100, but the primary source is general fund dollars. Right? So you may have a federal grant in here and some of the other, from other sources. The general fund support, those are the dollars that are provided to most departments, and almost every department receives general fund support. And that ranges from $375,000 from CCOM or 911 to over $81 million to the Sheriff's Office. The two departments that receive no general funds are Justice Court, which is what Sandra talked about, being paid by fines and fees collected, and Technology Services, which all of their funding is allocated out to either other departments or to broadband, so they have no general funds in them, but every other department has some general funds in it. Any questions about the difference? Okay, next slide. So this is just a display to show you how the various departments that receive general fund support. This is, you can cut and you can slice them, dice them in a lot of different ways. But if you look at internal services, county admin and the board, county council, finance and facilities, HR, and public and government affairs. So this is kind of the guts of running all the programs. Public safety, again, we also include disaster management, so it's not just your typical sheriff's office maybe and district attorney, but all of these departments are heavily invested in public safety. And the two operating departments, H3S, Health, Housing, and Human Services, and Transportation and Development. And then we have elected officials not in public safety, assessor, county clerk, and treasurer. So pretty straightforward. So the next slide shows you, this is an update from when I showed you a few weeks ago, which was the 23-24 budget. Remember, I wasn't allowed to show you the 24-25 budget until today. So what this shows you is how the general funds are distributed throughout the departments, and then there's a box that shows you what the change is from 23-24. And so you can see the departments in red have a decrease in their general fund support, and the ones in black have an increase. And so, but again, as Gary talked about, public safety, it has the vast majority of our discretionary general fund support dollars. Any questions about this? Gary?
I'd like to draw your attention. I know it's small print, and are there paper copies of this? We're going to get paper copies to you if you don't have one, because I don't have one. All right. The box on the right that shows the change from this current fiscal year to the proposed budget, that says it all right there to me. And in the red, several departments took a reduction without impacting major impacts to services or programs like H3S, juvenile, finance, transportation and development. The other departments took an increase, but they were small, like 1 or 2% increases, 3% increases. So that's the key. That's the magic right there. Please just refer to this. We'll get a paper copy for you. That will be very helpful in your discussions tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Well, it'd be great. Don't need it this week per se. I'd love to see that same box over the last 5 years.
Can we do that? That'd be interesting.
Yes.
So, as Gary mentioned, we'll go into some of this tomorrow, but I see finance, that's a pretty big cut. So we'll explain that. Is that more appropriate for tomorrow's discussion?
Yeah, and the little sideboard there says finance decreases due to using the state reimbursement for the courthouse. So it was in the finance and then it moved out. So
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
And Commissioner Savas, I have one point. You said you'd like to see it for the 5 years. The only difficulty with that is, if you all recall, 3 years ago, we did a chart of account change. And before the chart of account change, general fund support was not shown. So general fund support used to be just the negative. So every department, if they had a negative, by default, that was general fund support. But the challenge with that was you, the board, would ask us every single week, like, what is the subsidy for this program, or what is the subsidy for that project? We couldn't tell you because there was no way of running those numbers. So what we did when we did the chart of account change is we actually gave general fund support a number so that we could run reports and give you that information. So that general fund support is only available as of 3 years ago.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I think that will just help point out any anomalies, right? The one-times, so it'd be just nice to see the averaging.
Thank you.
Have
Next
that- We'll
slide.
have that to you by this Thursday. Please.
We can do that.
Tony, next slide, please. And this, again, displays where those puts and takes were in terms of the distribution of the general fund. You can see that public safety went up 2% from last year, as well as elected officials and operating departments, and internal services dropped, respectively. The primary reason for the drop in internal services was the way the cost allocation methodology worked. It was very intentional to have departments pay more and the general fund pay less of allocated costs. So we expected to see this decline, and it's a miracle it showed up. So that is correct. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about the forecast.
Thank you. Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director. And we do have copies printed. I think they just didn't make it into this room of this presentation, so you will have those before we leave today. Our forecast is 30 years out into the future, and we've been working on this for about 4 years. And it is very subjective to many of the changes, assumptions that we'll talk about, but it is a living document. Just in April, last month, we presented this to the board to review, and here they come now, and to the Budget Committee so that you can have a glimpse into how it's working. And then what we've done today is what you see is the first column is actuals from last fiscal year of 22-23. The second column for 23-24 is our projected. So we've asked all the departments to say, how are we going to end this year? Because we need to know where we're going to end so we can have a starting number. So that second column is actually forecasted for this current fiscal year ending June 30. The third column is now we've put in our budget. So we can now see what the budget that we have before you will do for the forecast. So these columns, as we add an actual and then the current and then the budget, helps us use these assumptions going forward. And this is only for the general fund. There are a couple other departments that have other funds that, yes, have their own forecast. WES has a 20-year forecast, I believe, and NCPRD has a 10-year forecast. But this forecast before you really is focused on the general fund, Fund 100. And we look at revenues. Are they reoccurring? How are they growing? So you can see there's taxes. You can see charges and fees. We also look at, and are those revenues one time or are they reoccurring? We also look at our expenditures. And as you notice, see 76% of our operating budget is personnel. We provide a lot of services to our county, and that is reflective there. Also in the forecast, we have our reserves for future use. Those are not considered part of the current year budget that can be appropriated, but we do have contingency if there's a current year unforeseen emergency. So this year's current budget was forecasted to end at $81 million. And you'll see here that this ending balance in the second column is actually $92 million. So we have made some adjustments and improvements in this year. We typically do not spend 100% of personnel or material and services. I think we had some additional revenue that came in this year was unanticipated. So our ending fund balance is greater than even what our budget was for this fiscal year. So we carry that over to start the next year. And there are policies, as mentioned, I believe Gary mentioned, on our contingency and reserve that we take into consideration. And each column is updated as assumptions are updated. We look at how the outlook 30 years reacts. We're always keeping our finger on that last final bottom right number. Is it going up? Is it going down? What are the activities that are happening now that are changing that? How much can the forecast bear with personnel increases, capital projects? So the next page, which is our last page, are the assumptions, some of the assumptions, not 100%. And these change, and as the information becomes available, we test how that forecast can live or survive under those different assumptions. We look at the property tax growth. So we're going to hear from our assessor tomorrow. You know, as the population grows, the population tax revenue also increases. We do have the cap of 3%, but if we're adding more dollars, that total property tax will continue to increase. And then we also look at the COLA, CPI with our material and services. And we also have, I do have one correction in this list of bullets. Our capital replacement reserve, we did modify it to $500,000 annually versus the $1 million we had in there. Because of certain expenditures that were going in, we felt we couldn't have a sustainable and structural forecast without bringing that reserve down. So that could change. We could have other components have a change next year where we could bring that up to 750. So those are things we look at. Yeah, okay, so that's pretty much it. Those are the assumptions. They're very much alive. And do you have any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Elizabeth, Sandra, and Cindy. Appreciate that. Okay, I do believe, Cindy or Wendy, excuse me, did you have a question?
Well, I was just wondering how often the state renews or evaluates the assumptions on the PERS contributions, specifically the inflation rate and that kind of actuarial.
So those are not calculated in the forecast. What we put into the forecast is what our PERS rate is, and it changes every 2 years. Do you have anything to add on that?
So Randall, sorry about that, Wendy. We review it regularly, so PERS meets, I think, every other month. We get those newsletters, and any time that there's any updates, then we will relook at that forecast to make sure that we're keeping time with that. PERS does a projection tool that they put out regularly, and like Elizabeth said, when they do their actuarial every other year, we will update based on the actuarial information that they provide. And then the projection tool that they, the calculation tool that they give us access to gives us like a 30-year outlook. And so we use that tool to plug into our forecast model as well. I mean, obviously, it's a projection model. It's not going to be exact, but it does a really good job of estimating based on their actuarial numbers.
Okay.
And the rates do go up every other year. So it's a biennial. So you'll see 1 year where it spikes, and then a second year where it stays flat, and you'll see that adjustment. And you can see that in our model.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Gary, is there any other business or presentations?
That is it for today, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for the committee? Okay, seeing no further questions, this committee is adjourned till tomorrow morning. Oh, excuse me, Elizabeth?
Recessed.
Yeah, we're recessed until tomorrow.
Oh, recessed, excuse me. Forgive me, new guy. We are recessed until tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Okay, and Gary, if I could just mention one thing. We received many questions from the Budget Committee, which thank you very much for taking the time to delve into the information. We emailed you the responses this afternoon, and we printed those for you We tried to do our best to answer those. You guys provided some very thoughtful questions, and so thank you very much. Some of those questions were repetitive, so you all were all on the same wavelength, and I thank you very, very much for that. Some of those questions we will delve into the department when we get into those themselves, and then others, if we don't answer them, please review the material, and if we haven't answered it thoroughly, please raise the question and we will dive into it as a group, because I guarantee you, if you're asking it, somebody else will have the same question, and we want to make sure we thoroughly answer.
Thank you, Sandra. Gary?
Yes, and will there be paper printed copies of those questions, Sandra? Right here. Right here? Oh, did you distribute? Oh, I'm sorry. They've already been given to them. You've been given to you. Just process, so we start at 8:30 tomorrow, so please arrive a bit earlier if you can. You may leave your things in this room if you like. We'll lock the room. We are going to change your seating order for tomorrow, however. So like Chair Carn, you'll be at the dais, plus one other public member,
Great.
and we'll rotate that. Please remember, you're here all day tomorrow. We will feed you. We're going to feed you lunch and dinner, but we'll have presentations all day, and then the public testimony starting at 6 p.m. until it's done. But we'll take good care of you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary, and we will see you all tomorrow before 8:30.